Okay, tell me something. What do you mean by this? Is something that I also had gone through personally, transitioning, feeling that I had to transition from being a designer to being an artist.
So yes, when I started my career, I kind of based it off of like the art I was making, but at the same time, I wasn't like evolved enough because I really do feel like for an artist you have to kind of be older. And I always say this whenever somebody asks me this.
What is your number one reason that you as a person feels this desire for being an artist? You've already accomplished in the sense of what you're doing. You already have a studio practice, you have your own business, you're also making, you've been an illustrator. And for me, I think, yeah, of course, there's fine artists and illustrators, they have different roles to play, but at least in the back of things, we're all creative people. We're all creating something.
Okay, so one thing is that making art and being creative without sort of like that's like a joyous experience, really. And being sort of liberated from the ideas of doing it for commerce, in the sense that you don't have a client who's telling you what to do. That's something that I still like seek out. Of course, you need a lot of courage also to be able to say like I will drop my what my client thinks or drop what people want me to think.
Hey, you guys, welcome back to the Arts to Hearts podcast. I have another special guest with me this week. Back on the podcast, straight from the book pages of our magazine, ATH magazine issue 6, right in front of me. Welcome to the podcast, Mira.
Thank you, Charuka. Nice to be here and very happy to be part of the magazine as well.
We are very, very excited to have you. I'm very excited because I've also seen your work here and there, on Instagram. And, I love how, because you have these vibrant colors and ladies and girls, and that's something I love. So it's so nice to see now your face, associate your art with the artist. How are you doing today?
I am doing really good. I have a lot in store today, and I'm like really excited to talk about it.
Perfect. Let's begin by Mira. Anyone who's listening, can you introduce yourself before we dive into everything else?
Yes, so I'm a designer and illustrator by day, and I guess artist in the wee hours of the morning or the night. I'm kind of taking my illustration career into an art career where I'm, trying to evolve my illustrative style into something that I feel would work better or have more meaning within an art space. And I function as a designer. As I said, I run a studio called Studio Cole in Mumbai. And I like to focus on issues of gender and mental health specifically, as well as like uh, I think the identity of being an Indian woman, or even like queerness comes into my art a lot. I'm very interested in how I would say like women sort of live their lives within interior spaces, like in the sense that like domestic chores and things like that. I feel a lot of artists. Exactly. And you have like a lot of like I think there's a lot of male artists out there who will do a whole bunch of things about how the streets look like because they're actually frequenting the streets. But I want to know what like women's homes look like how do they make their homes and what's really part and parcel of it. So I also really enjoy making very fun stuff. I like character design and I really like making characters and how that works in fine art is very interesting to me. So I'm a big fan of like a lot of pop artists, especially like people like Cause and people who've taken like graffiti and then moved it to this like fine art space. Very interesting to me how they kind of bridge those different worlds and cross them. I would just like to do it in a more like feminine way, I guess you could say. So that's me. That's what I do.
Wonderful. Okay, tell me something. What do you mean by this is something that I also had gone through personally, transitioning, feeling that I had to transition from being a designer to being an artist. What do you feel that you're trying to pin in there? Let's talk about that. Because I'm sure a lot of people here, as artists, I know, who want to learn design, and I know a lot of designers who want to, pursue art as a career. And this is something I've also been myself in, and I know you also. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So yes, when I started my career, I kind of based it off of like the art I was making, but at the same time, I wasn't like evolved enough because I really do feel like for an artist you have to kind of be older. And I always say this whenever somebody asks me this, is that there's a Miles Davis quote where he says, "It takes a really long time to sound like yourself." Because when you come out into the world you're so you have to be exposed to a lot of things to understand what you want to do, and by being exposed you also get influenced, and it's influences are a great thing, but then you also have to sift through the influences and figure out what you want to take and what you want to leave behind, what's part of you, what you resonate with, and what you also don't feel like you resonate with, and you're also figuring out your identity. So in a large part I would say like the idea of like me drawing as a kid, and I could already see some themes, emerging from what I used to draw as a child, and they haven't really changed, to be honest. you know so looking at like 10-20 years ago what I was drawing, or even 25-30 years ago what I was drawing, and it's really not very different from what I'm drawing today. But it I feel like it comes to the point where you are able to say like, oh, this is special about your work and you should keep it. I think a lot of the times when you're growing up, you kind of have a little bit of a complex because you see so much work and you kind of think, oh, I should be drawing this or I should be drawing that. Luckily, I did have a very, like, I was very opinionated. Like, my parents tried to shove, like, Renaissance art down my throat. And I think it was amazing that they were, like, so supportive about my career. But at the same time, their idea of what, what I should like was very different from what I actually liked.
And sometimes you also don't know who you are, and you need time to figure that out.
Yeah. And you also need to kind of have time to appreciate what that is and what you bring, as well as discover, like, the world of art is much bigger than Renaissance art. Or like even like negotiate, say, with yourself on like the value of, say, something like abstract art, which I really love, but then the whole world has a very conflicted opinion on, where they're like abstract art is not real art.
What is your number one? Sorry, tell me something. What is your number one? If I had to ask you, like, because I have this for myself. I'll answer once you answer. What is your number one reason that you as a person feels this desire for being an artist? You've already accomplished in the sense of what you're doing. You already have a studio practice, you have your own business, you're already, you're also making, you've been an illustrator. And for me, I think, yeah, of course, there's fine artists and illustrators, they have different roles to play, but at least in the back of things, we're all creative people, we're all creating something. What is that you feel is still missing as a creative that you're looking out for?
Okay, so one thing is that making art and being creative without sort of the, like, that's like a joyous experience, really. And being sort of liberated from the ideas of doing it for commerce, in the sense that you don't have a client who's telling you what to do. That's something that I still like seek out. Of course, you need a lot of courage also to be able to say like, I will drop my what my client thinks or drop what people want me to think. But I think really what pushes me to do it is like two things: just the simple joy of making it, and even like solving my own brief in my head. But it could also be that like I see that there are gaps in what is out there. As an Indian creative or somebody who works on the Indian subcontinent, and we've done like, me and my friends have done like so many projects on the Indian subcontinent representing issues that are not spoken about here. Like we cover a lot of marginalized groups, and we're interested in what they have to say and what their idea of India is. Like, what is a non-mainstream idea of India? I think even when you're talking about what's happening inside women's homes, it's not like something that is covered very much. So last year at the India Art Fair, I was invited to do a digital piece, and I spoke about dynamics within families because I don't think those are spoken about too much. And really, it is something like the domain of the home, and we really don't see them. Like, there are positive dynamics, there are negative dynamics, and there are dynamics that also sort of are very typical to an Indian home. And what I was trying to do was say, like, on the outside, your Indian family looks like this, like a typical Indian family portrait. And Indian families actually try very hard to fit into a point where they don't mind being average or mediocre. They're not trying to look better than other people. They're just trying to, like, not, you know, break the mold at all. And then behind that, what is happening? Like, what's really going on? What are they in a sense cloaking or hiding in some ways? And so it's like, your typical mother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law issues, versus, some of, I feel like a lot of Indians place more than anything, sort of place emphasis on earning money, as like, because they are, evolving out of like survival strategies all the time. And I just wanted to highlight that, and I don't feel like anyone is talking about that. And I think that's a big goal, like that's an overarching goal, which I figured over time is what I was interested in, and actually gave myself permission to do, because it wasn't necessarily lucrative. Yeah, so I have like a lot of thoughts about. I'm a big geek. I read about politics and psychology and mental health and all of these things, and I see how they have an interplay with each other. And I think those are interesting things to talk about. And if especially if nobody's talking about it, I would love to be, the one talking about it. So that's the broader goal.
Wonderful. So tell me something. Can you talk a little bit about your career as an illustrator also? And you have these women characters, and you have this style in the sense of having this pop culture, but also using very localized subject matters. So it does look very approachable in the sense of it looks very contemporary. It looks very, you know, it can reach to the masses, but also it is something that's very localized in the sense of the subject matter that you just spoke about. Can you talk about how you've also come to this point of finding um, a balance between, like, your own style and how what these roles are? Like you said, you're also obsessed with character design. So what these ladies are, do you have anything in mind? Like, do you what your creative process is also like while you do this?
Oh yeah, so these are all now very deliberate things that I picked out and deliberately focused on. Like, say for example, thinking, I think a lot of illustrators actually don't think, because they're often imitating a style. Not that that's wrong, but I think they don't realize, the skin color, or the way their bodies sort of work within the frame, or how you view their bodies, and what are typically like, uh, ways that, like, queer and women, like queer people and women actually want to see bodies, which is a departure from like the male gaze. So my illustration has evolved within that direction, simply because of my engagement with these kind of topics. But at the same time, I don't believe in being like, political to the point where you're off-putting to people. I think that why popular culture and the mainstream often hold sometimes very violent narratives, or sometimes very damaging narratives, is because they dress it up and make it look cool, or they make it look slick. And I'm like, you can easily take many of these principles and you can dress it up and make it look cool. Like, you can make kindness look cool. You can make, you can make, I mean, kindness is like a very like Miss Universe kind of answer. But what I mean to say is, like, understanding how empathy actually really plays out within, understanding these communities, and how you actually look at a deeper version of how we see images, which is something that fascinates me. Like, all kinds of image making fascinate me, and why you see it this way. Does it change your experience of the world after you've seen certain people's art? That's like something that's very interesting to me. Is like, how can it alter your worldview?
Who inspires you the most? Who inspires you?
I think, like, whenever somebody talks about this, I feel like, whenever somebody asks me about this, I feel like there are a couple of painters. I actually don't know how to pronounce her name, so I'm not going to pronounce her name. But there is somebody whose paintings are seen around Khirki in Delhi. She does a lot of work around women in public spaces, and she has this these women who are sort of like painted on walls, and they're drinking tea together.
Yeah, right.
I really am fascinated by that because you think that that's something that women have the right to do, but they actually don't have the right to have leisure in public space. Their leisure is usually behind closed doors. It's like a salon.
They're not they're generally not the watchers, but they're ones that being watched. They're not the gazers.
So actually, having them, they're not the gazers. They're not allowed to have like leisure time out in the open or publicly. And like as a working woman, I pay the same taxes for like public spaces as any guy does. So why should we not have those spaces for us as well? So, I mean, it's always that's why there's this idea of to always be accompanied by someone, etc. All of those things. There is a broader movement called Why Loiter on this specific subject, and I think it was really interesting to like, what if just women just loiter? They just occupy public spaces in a different way that forces men to kind of give them space within these larger things. And I feel like that when it came out through her work, this artist's work was just like so it stops you from taking things for granted. Like you're kind of able to understand that this is not a reality for many women, that they're not allowed even something as basic as this. And this is even like a far cry from like say what for like queer people to get to be publicly queer, right? But we do talk about we talk about that sometimes, like can I appear like a different gender than I'm assigned within a public space? Yeah, not being watched or being like commented on or uh, treated as differently, or like my human rights are taken away from me. In that case, it would go further actually.
Also, I think it is it's sometimes it's also not being watched the problem. Sometimes it's just our own self-conscious, like a lot of times I don't know, I may be wrong, but I'm just going to put my view. Like so many times as women, it is not someone else putting that on us. It is so many times that we ourselves are putting it on ourselves, like um very typical, very typical Indian context. Like if you get married, there's just the way women see themselves, like should they be doing this, what if or if if you're traveling alone, and like you have this mental check every time, like in very basic day to day things, like how will I be perceived, or just this constant sense of knowing that I'm safe or not, or checking in if this is safe for me or not. So even if it is safe or not, we keep on thinking about, like, maybe just because of the way the society has been structured. And I think that it is only one step further if it is like a queer person or anyone who is not in the majority.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that we internalize. We know how dangerous it is to, or like how challenging it is to others to be within those spaces, because it's not like only men perpetuate patriarchy or homophobia or any kind of like transphobia. We know that, so we internalize it already and figure from there. So we're conditioned to know that we are supposed to survive within this system, and these are the sort of prices you have to pay. And I think that's also a way that I feel like a lot of even if I make a painting like how she did, like this painter who I admire, she's not just changing men's views, she's changing women's views also. Like you can occupy space this way. And I think that's also what like I was surprised when I was doing yeah, yeah. And like the gaze is internalized, so men are seeing you from a gaze of how attractive are you, and like women are seeing themselves through that gaze, how attractive I am.
Also, like it's a very strong message to say, if you're watching other, like if you're watching out for women, I'm watching you. Like it's it's like a full circle. Also, like women are turning the tables around.
Yeah. So I think even the series that you've picked, is a lot about this actually. The series that is part of the magazine, because it's like, what if I were to drop the gaze that I am conditioned to see myself in, and I just go to the gym to be strong, like a man is usually free to do. Not that men don't have body issues, and there's this emphasis on muscularity. That's, yeah, I feel like it comes from a different place, but I feel like a lot of times women are not allowed to be muscular, are not allowed to feel strong. Yeah, I mean, it's all on the basis of like how they're viewed, and their femininity is viewed, rather than being like, I just want to be able to, take care of my body, or feel strong in my body, or embody certain feelings when I go to the gym, rather than being like looked at all the time and only judging myself on, or only go to the gym to engage with it from that point of view, or whatever fitness activity you engage in. It doesn't have to be in a gym. So like Hasina Pasina is about like just being beautiful that way, and it's also kind of crossing the ideas of typical femininity in a woman's body, because it's a life that we tell ourselves that we don't, that we're only feminine in this way. Our bodies are capable of looking quite different, and we just need to kind of accept the fact that, like, under certain training or certain performance or activities, it can change, and it's not unnatural necessarily. So the binary is sort of upset by that, by those artworks.
And tell me something. How has your early years as a child has impacted your own thought process and what matters to you and you being a creative? Were you a creative child always?
Yes, always. And I think I was also, my parents were they weren't very like keen on making me like necessarily be like super girly or feminine, which I am again grateful to them for. Um, I also, I mean, I don't feel like I conform to any gender as such. Always felt that growing up, and I conflated that with uh, my, like who I'm attracted to, rather than how I present myself. And now it's taken me so much time to realize that, oh, I'm not, I wasn't like gay, or I'm not gay, but I was like, something is different. Like, I'm not like typical, but I think of myself as gender non-conforming for the most part. And I feel like that did also play in, because how I was allowed to be female or a woman was also questioned a lot by men around me, by women around me. Sometimes the women were generally more accepting. uh, Men were just like really enraged that I could be masculine in some of the ways that they are masculine, and they just got really pissed off about it. So a large part of that is also like a rebellion or like a reclaiming of it, which is why the work is like,
Also, a lot of times we feel being feminine means you know means being weak, not being taken seriously, not given an equal opportunity. Like, there's so many things, like, as young girls we fight it out. We just don't accept who we want to be. Then we feel like, I've been there, where I felt like I had to act in a certain way. Let's say if I wanted access to an equal opportunity, or if I wanted more freedom, then I had to behave like a brother, or like my brother, like a man, not like a woman, because then women cry, women are weak, and then you cannot handle that. And I think that a lot of rebellion does come from there.
yeah. I think it's like a lot of it was like, how authentic can you be, like when you want to embody this thing that is considered feminine or considered masculine, are you allowed to do it? Or just because you're born a certain way, you're supposed to be sort of trapped in it, like behaving a certain way. So I feel like a lot of that work is because of that, and I also acknowledge and recognize, which I think is required, about how much women participate for their survival in these systems, how much men are also impacted by these systems, and how they also need to be in a sense, like liberated from those systems. Like, yes, you can like be feminine sometimes. It's not as binary or, pushed to the extremes. Like, I don't know why people are not embracing the common factors of like both genders at the extremes, because there are so many genders. They just want to, you know, put us at opposite ends of the spectrum and make us like completely, alienated from each other. Or like, if a man does this, then a woman has to be opposite of this. If a woman is this, then the man has to be opposite. We're not opposites. I'm not sure why we are opposites. Actually, I think there's much more in common than there is like apart. So some of those, some of the work is like critical of women as well in their role of like how they also perpetuate patriarchy for their own survival, of course. But yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, I think, because also the narrative has always been, um, that I think women are raised with the mindset that there's only so much room, and it is you versus someone else. If you make it, if someone else makes it, you will not. And that's the biggest lie we've been told. And, in a way that we've just been pulled together, versus there's room for all of us. If there's and I think for me, what has been a game changer, like in the sense of my own mindset, has been if I see someone pursuing and doing something, and I feel like if I admire it, I cannot, I can't promise how that felt maybe in the beginning of my career, but now when I look at it for quite a few years now, I'm like, wow, she's, if that's possible for her, that's possible for me, and that's possible for anyone who's willing to work for it. So like one person's success is the only means success for many more than just that person. And I think that mindset, if we, you know um change, it can bring such a positive change. Tell me something. What do you feel has been the biggest struggle for you as a woman in the creative fields, working in India, but also just like in general also, but your biggest struggle? Really? Tell me more about that.
I mean, first, I think like entering the field. Like, I mean, I've heard a lot of feedback on my appearance, and I'm sometimes like, well, I feel like it matters a lot if you're a woman in this field, like what your appearance is, or any field really, what your appearance is. Often it is.
Can you objectify what does that mean by appearance, in the sense of like what do what do people expect out of you? Like, I mean,
So what I mean is kind of my appearance plays a lot of being a woman and being in front. Like, so for example, if you're good at your work, being a woman or like showing up as a woman makes, I think this is why. Yeah, I mean, there are other ways also. Yeah, just being a woman itself is like such a thing. Like, so if you're working remotely with somebody and they actually didn't know what your gender was, because like uh, spending somebody who's perpetually online like me has sort of the ability to kind of not reveal their gender in so many situations online. And I've seen a marked difference between like somebody like seeing me and perceiving me and then relating it to what they heard me say, what I was talking about, how I see the world. It's challenging to them then, because they're expecting me to be a certain. So also, like, I mean, I'm not, it's not like I've not been in situations where like many of my jobs people were very, oh, I really don't care if it sounds like bold in a certain way, but they were fine with like, okay, she is talented. They didn't have a problem accepting that. But I think it was also this way, like, you can't just be like this, you also have to, like, we also will comment on the way you look all the time. And I don't, I mean, a lot of people talk about, say, like things like pretty privilege and stuff like that. But I think a large part also how you behave impacts the way they see you, regardless of what you look like. And if you are like, maybe I don't know, even walking like more. mannishly, and that just maybe the natural way you walk, that it's just such a trigger for them. So being in the, I mean, it's one of the, like, a lot of people like, oh, you started your own thing, you always probably had that dream to do it. I'm like, yeah, but then a large part of it was also like creating these spaces for myself was my ability to say that I don't have to deal with this stuff, because I just want to make stuff. Like, I don't want to be interrupted by all of these, comments and uh, being told how to be this way or that way. If I'm here to do my work, and I don't need all of the other inputs. As long as I don't come like dressed up like a, you know, maybe like a homeless person, or like not groomed or whatever. Nothing against homeless people, but yeah, I mean, if I don't appear that way and I am like fine in that sense, I really don't know why it matters to anybody what how I appear. But it was such a big deal for them, so I was just like, I don't give you this feedback. Please stop giving me this feedback. So yeah, I would say that was the biggest issue, at least in those spaces. Now that I'm, able to kind of sort of transcended by having set up my own thing, and I think a lot has changed also about what is acceptable to say within those environments. Uh, Partially because like there's been so much awareness on those kind of issues. I think there is a shift, but I would say that it depends on who you're with. If you're with the old guard, those guys that protect this, they don't realize maybe that they're protecting their spaces in that way, but you can't do something too challenging for them. So
That's a very different answer to hear. But thank you so much, Mira. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and um, journey with us. Okay, tell me something before I let you go. What are you working on right now? And if you have anything upcoming, of course, you're published in the ATH magazine issue 6, and I hope you did have a good experience. But thank you. Um, what are you working on? Is there a project that you want to share? And where can people learn more about you? Of course, they can find you in the ATH Magazine 6, and you grab anyone who's listening can grab a copy. But how else can they support you and, learn more about you?
yes, so I have some new products coming up, and I will be launching a store very soon. Hopefully, in the next couple of months, we should be having that. I am taking my art career a little more seriously in that sense. So, yeah, they should be able to even buy a lot of cool stuff that's coming up. And there's always been this stuff, and it's always been well appreciated, but I've not made it very accessible for people to kind of get it. And I feel like that is something that is the next step. So you should be able to see a lot more of that stuff coming up. It'll be fun. Yeah, lots of stuff in the vault.
So you let us know, and I will root for you. Share it with the world. And a big congratulations. And we hope to see you amazing things as well.
Yes, thank you for having me on this podcast, Charuka. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.